of you and it impacts all of us. This is an issue that concerns our card transactions, our credit card, our debit card transactions that we do on a daily basis now over multiple online apps and portals. So whether it's your cab service, whether it's your food delivery, whether it's your favorite online shopping portal, whether it's your travel portal that you frequently use, or any other such app or portal which asks for your payment, and then you use some of your pre-saved card details. Now, the Reserve Bank of India has come up with guidelines for payment aggregators on such card payments and the data that is actually being stored. Essentially, this guideline says that some merchants who store your credit card and debit card data when you make a purchase will not be able to do so come July. So effectively, if you already have pre-fed your credit card details, the entire number, the expiry date, all of that, those details on any portal, they will not be valid come the implementation of these rules. So every time you do a transaction, you don't just put in a CVV or an OTP, but you put in all of these details, and all of these details will then have to be verified with the bank that's given you that card. Now, the Reserve Bank of India says this is essentially being done to reduce the scope of online card payment frauds. Now, you would have heard many instances where all of this data has actually gotten leaked and become public, or has been hacked and bought by people, especially in the dark web. Often this happens with the biggest of the names such news has come. And sometimes you don't know your data has been stolen and may be used to then do transactions without you even finding out. Now, while many have welcomed this move, there are few retailers especially who are saying this will cause inconvenience to everybody. This added layer is not really going to help, except that it just makes the entire process inconvenient. So we thought let's pick this up, let's ask the experts, let's also give you a sense of the gravity of the problem, just how vulnerable is our data on all of these portals and apps that we use now on a daily basis. What can we do, and will this step help us? Let's say good evening to Pawan Duggal, cyber law expert who joins us this evening, Dipali Panjoshi, former ED with the Reserve Bank of India, Darshan Shantamurthy, payment data security expert. He's the founder, CEO of SISA, Fali Hodiwala, partner and fintech leader at EY India, and Pankaj Bansal, Chief Business Development Officer at Bank Bazaar, also joining us this evening. Let me actually first of all begin by trying to get an overall picture. And Pawan Duggal, if I can start with you. You know, we don't realize, but on a daily basis, travel, shopping, food order, international travel, cabs for your daily bookings, and so much more gets done. And all of this is linked to our payments, which, if it's not an e-wallet, it's a card detail. What's the extent of frauds that we are witnessing, and just how vulnerable is the data?
Actually, we as users are pretty vulnerable, except we like to keep our eyes closed, and we like to always believe that it will be somebody else who will ultimately become a victim of cyber crime rather than us. And invariably, people who become victims of these cyber crimes prefer not to report. So the general feeling is everything is hunky-dory, nothing to worry, no problem of any kind whatsoever. The ground reality is that a majority of these service providers who are actually capturing or enabling you to save your credit card or debit card details on their platforms are found to be deficient in terms of their compliances. Way back in 2011, the Reserve Bank of India had come up with a G. Gopala Krishna working group, of which I was also a member. And we had come up with the legal framework as also technical framework on cybersecurity for banks. Now, while that's been adhered to by banking players, I find a number of these intermediaries and service providers, these app providers, these platform owners, do not comply with basic levels of cybersecurity. Yes, they would give lip service, but then you still don't know how your data is being preserved. You still don't know what kind of a reasonable security practices or procedures they are adopting while they are dealing, handling, or processing your sensitive personal data. Mind you, your financial details are not normal data. They are sensitive personal data. The law requires you to put it an added level and layer of compliances in terms of protection. But I'm finding a massive gap between what the law is currently requiring versus what actually is existing. And for this huge number of people who are getting sucked into this whirlpool of cyber criminal activity, there's virtually no remedy. The fact remains is a majority of these app providers say, look, we are not under the RBI because we are not a banking institution. They are still intermediaries under Section 21W of the Information Technology Act 2000. But barring certain bare minimum due diligence parameters that were given way back in 2011 by the Information Technology Rules 2011, I find that the government has still not specified any specific parameters for protecting and preserving cybersecurity. And the fault lies much bigger. India does not have a dedicated cybersecurity law. Yeah. Our National Cybersecurity Policy 2013 has been a paper tiger. So a lot of gaps that are currently remaining that need to be fulfilled. And I think this kind of an incident that's come up, it should be a wake-up call for all stakeholders to start giving far more significance to cybersecurity than just mere lip service.
Okay, thank you for that comprehensive picture. Not very encouraging, but if it was, then we wouldn't probably be having this conversation. But at least it sets the stage for what it is that we are dealing with. Now let's come to the specific set of proposals that the Reserve Bank of India is trying to bring in, and what that would mean. Darshan, from a user's point of view, one can turn around and say, oh, but I have the CVV and I'm the one who's going to be punching in the OTP. So what am I losing if the aggregator or the merchant portal has the rest of my data?
See, firstly, I believe on overall, I agree with Pawan that we need to emphasize everyone needs to take cybersecurity and payment data security seriously. But having said that, I'm an optimist, and I believe that the regulator is in the right direction of bringing in the right, the master direction that has been released by RBI on February 18th is a step in that right direction. At the end of the day, as far as users are concerned, I don't care whether I should assume trust, and it is duty bound on the providers and the ecosystem to make sure that that trust is built in. And so we just need to, all of us in the ecosystem have to work a lot harder to earn that trust. And the master direction by RBI, the regulator in covering, and this time the circular also covers not just the scheduled banks, but payment banks, a lot more other what they call as regulated entities to follow all these, follow the standards that are the best practices, payment data security standards. They have come out with detailed prescriptive requirements, what entities need to do. I think it's just about now enforcement and making sure that, one carries forward. And I'm sure the regulator is going to take things very seriously for non-compliances with best practices going forward.
So, but help us understand, the threat that we are looking at, the threat that may exist today. And I obviously, we're not necessarily saying one portal may be more unsafe than the other, but what is the level of threat to just given the information that we have already to these guys?
So what we understood, currently the threat levels are, I wouldn't be able to put it depends on provider to provider. But having said that, there is a fair amount of best security practices that organizations need to follow. Security is very easy to start with, but very difficult to master. At the end of the day, there is just for the bad guys, they just need one thing to penetrate into a network. But for the good guys, it's you have to make sure that everything is plugged in. So it's not going to be easy. But having said that, I'm sure with the community getting together and the industry forces and with the regulators push drive now, it should be the threat level should be fairly controlled as we move forward. Yeah, so that's my take.
Okay,
Tanvi.
okay. We were just looking at some of the recent examples. I think in the initial days, there was one big example of Zomato, which had happened. In the recent ones, there is Just Pay, which happened last year. That even in Big Basket, there was news that allegedly the user data, including your email IDs, password hashes, pins, and your card details were available online on the dark web. Now, again, the point that I'm trying to make here is if we don't save the data and every time punch it in, it still goes into the system. Pankaj, and is that a concern even then? And are we at least then just saying removing one layer, but the threat still exists?
So basically, Tanvi, I'll just give you a brief background on what's happening here. So what RBI has given as a guidance in terms of the March 17 circular now, which is going to get implemented, is that a merchant at its website cannot store a data, whether whichever form it could be. The data storage will not happen at a merchant site. That's a simple point. Whether it is he cannot retain a data from a data security perspective, which is I think the key objective behind this circular. And this is not only to merchants. If you look at it, is also applicable to all the payment aggregators, payment gateways from that perspective. So not only Amazons, Flipkarts of the world, which is driving this e-commerce, in the country. You also have somebody like Paytms and Google Pays, where any credit card or a debit card data cannot be stored at their site. So I think this is a very significant move from RBI. If you look at from a data security perspective, you rightly said, Tanvi, the basic risk that we see when you see a transaction moving up, right? You have seen the numbers from 2019, 20, and 21, how digital payments is getting connected to tier 2, 3, 4 cities. And there's so much of data which is coming on Zomato's, Flipkarts, Amazon's, Netflix, all these OTT programs. It's a huge gamut of data that is getting accumulated at a partner at the merchant's website. So what RBI is trying to do here is to protect the data. Obviously, the claim from the big aggregators, I would say, or from the big merchants like Amazon is that we are PCI DSS 1 certified. There are 12 level of security being there, but still, you rightly mentioned, right? Just Pay 3.5 crore customers. It's not a small amount. They used to process data for Amazons also of the world, right? And that data breach is something which I think is something which is very significant. 3.5 crore customers is not a small amount from a data breach perspective, and it was open in the dark web. Everybody can go and look at that data, right? So I think that's the major concern RBI must have formulated. There is a guideline which got which was issued on 17th March with the entire framework on these things. And that's now the date has come very near for implementation. So obviously you will see a lot of, letters being issued and letters being written to RBI saying these 3-4 things, we can do it at our end to make sure data is not compromised.
So
I think that's the.
Sorry, let me just get a quick clarification from you. Are we still just looking at card details essentially, or does this also include name, address, details of the address, all of the other things that often your shopping portals say for you, so you don't have to punch it in every single time when you choose your addresses, but that's also personal details, that's also personal data. Will none of that be stored at all?
So today the guideline sits on the card data. So basically card is your name. You have got your expiry date on the card. Obviously CVV needs not to be stored on this site. So I think it's the basic data that is as per the guidelines. There's nothing else that we see right now from the data guidelines that we have got on 17th March.
Okay. So I'm trying to understand, and Fali, maybe you can come in here. Why is it that some of the players in the industry are objecting to it? It may take 30 more seconds and a bit of inconvenience for me to get up, get my card out and punch in that data. I'm sure by the 5th or the 7th time I'll remember the details. I won't even need the card anymore to write those digits in. So why is it a problem?
Yeah, so let's look at it from their perspective, and then let's look at it from the RBI's perspective and your and my perspective in protecting us as consumers. But to answer your question, I think the competition for customer experience and the competition between these large portals is really boiling down to how superior a customer experience can I offer my consumers. And research shows that typically the latency on a website or the speed at which a website, literally going into seconds, provides from a customer experience perspective really predicts the amount of people which will actually be drawn to your website and actually then make transactions and purchases on your website. So from their perspective, these are large companies investing millions of dollars in customer experience, a smooth checkout process, etc., which is great and very important. But then if you really look at it from the perspective of the regulator, in India, if you just add all of the debit cards, while the credit cards are still, relatively small at 60 million, you've got literally hundreds of billions of cards. And even if a small portion of these get onto the sites of even one or two players who may have compromised, infrastructure, you can imagine the havoc that would cause both in terms of sharing of data and potentially compromising that data to make transactions. So while I fully understand and sympathize with some of the larger players who've invested, a lot in smooth processes and making checkouts as seamless as possible, and then you've got this problem where a customer has to take out his or her card from their wallet, look at the number, punch in 16 digits. Yes, it is painful, but I think it's a far better option to do that and endure 30 seconds or a minute of inconvenience than getting an OTP or not getting an OTP and seeing that there's been a debit of 50,000 or a lakh of rupees to your card or bank account. And I think scarce a day goes by when you don't pick up the newspaper and read at least 2 instances of this happening. And every month, and these are just the articles covered in the press, and every month is just sort of grows exponentially. So it really doesn't take an expert to really tell you that the RBI needs to do something. It may be a bit drastic, but I think until we have a more mature cybersecurity framework, a more mature data privacy framework, these will be some radical steps that will be important for the country, and in the long run will benefit e-commerce and really benefit the entire ecosystem.
Absolutely. In fact, we've also got Dipali Pant who's joining us on this conversation. Dipali Pant Joshi, your view on this step being taken. I think cyber fraud today is one of the biggest challenges for any regulating agency across the world. And to come up with newer rules every day, you get some backing, but you also have some who are objecting.
You're absolutely correct, Tanvi, but this requires careful consideration and thought, as there are 2 aspects to it. I mean, somebody talked about a wow customer experience. Great, but if you just remove the W, it becomes an how customer experience. If you have the peril of your data being misused. And the point is that this is a statement on development. This was announced in the Statement on Development and Regulatory Policies on the 4th of December. And these are master directions in digital payment security controls. Now, let's not just latch on to the card, because they're basically focusing on a robust grievance structure and an insistence on implementation of common minimum standards and security controls. And that is for customer protection. Now, this was my remit when I was the executive director at the RBI. And prior to that, I was a banking ombudsman for the state of Andhra Pradesh. 90% of the complaints which were received were related to card transactions, fraudulent transactions. And now with increasing, what the RBI calls as E3, it's enhanced enabling environment, this is just going to increase. So for customers to use digital products in a more safe and secure manner, this is quite essential. And ultimately, you see, the guidelines are broad spectrum. They're looking at governance and management of security risks, at general security controls, at the application security lifestyle, at the authentication framework, and also very particularly at fraud risk management, reconciliation mechanisms. And that payment system is the entire and the sole responsibility of the central bank. Why are we confining this to regulated entities like the scheduled commercial banks, the small finance banks, the payment banks, and the card issuing NBFCs? Because these regulated entities sort of bear the imprimatur of the central bank. So we just cannot afford anything to go wrong in the steps we are taking to extend the banking frontier through digital transformation and a kind of digital autobahn. So these are security control directions, and the specific controls are for internet banking, mobile payments, application security controls, and card payment. Because Tanvi, this is where we feel that a robust governance structure and common minimum standards are missing. So, I mean, I don't want to name the particular institution, but there has been some concern that in the launch of new products, the FSP, which is the functionality, security, performance, is not looked at. So this is very vital. You need to have a digital infrastructure, and once you put in place robust and scalable infrastructure as one goes along, it's not sort of written stone. There can be various ways in which it can be modified so that the primary thing is customer protection is ensured, because there is a lot of digital apartheid. There's a lot of, I would say that even I am digitally illiterate and I would feel very afraid, I generally click on the cash on delivery option as the safer option when buying my books or other things. So there is a fear, there is an apprehension which has to be allayed and addressed. And these guidelines are expected to go a very long way in doing that. Because you see, you need safeguards. Why do you need safeguards? Everybody wants integrity of data. Every single person and his dog wants confidentiality, customer confidentiality and security. So yes, you can say that, there are these web application firewalls for services which are offered on the internet. That's all very good. But we just want that the customer should have the confidence of technology adoption.
Okay.
And his customer experience will not really truly suffer. Let's just take a broader perspective that these are things which are being done because of the digital fraud, because you know very well that there was the second largest institution which could not, which needed a forensic audit of its digital systems. I don't want to go there.
Yes.
I just want to say that this is for customer protection.
Okay, fair enough. You say, Ms. Joshi, that you even now you choose to shop online and pay in cash for that, because it's about it's about the comfort level. It's also about confidence and having that confidence in the system. There's also the other side, and while we were preparing for this, many youngsters in our own team actually ended up realizing that they've fed in and saved their cards data on at least a dozen of these portals, from the OTT platforms that you use to watch, to where you order your groceries, to where you shop for your rest of your daily essentials, and it's the whole gamut. Now, there are two other pointers that have emerged, and if I can just take the conversation forward with that. For example, Fali, if I can ask you this, maybe, what happens in the cases of refund? That seems to be one argument that the retailers are making, that this will make the process of addressing their grievances and the refunds more complicated. Then what happens now?
Well, what happens when you go and use your card at a physical store, right? And you then want to charge back because you have an issue. So the cards have very set processes. The card companies like Master, Visa, RuPay have set processes for chargebacks, as it's called in the payments parlance, whereby that if for example, a ticket is cancelled or a piece of merchandise is returned, there are proper laid down processes where the bank agrees to refund the money to the card holder, and the merchant and the merchant's bank make that payment, assuming that the commercial terms are agreed upon. So I don't think that this is a strong enough argument, to be very frank, because a lot of this so-called refund or chargeback really happens at the network level by the card companies. Yes, again, just as it makes the whole checkout process a bit easier, yes, it may make the whole refund process from a reconciliation process easier. But even if you're refunding the money, you still have to refund it through the network, which really manages that card, which is your Master, Visa, RuPay, Amex.
Tanvi, I have an input. You can.
Yes, go ahead, Darshan.
Yeah. So so obviously, all these transactions have a transaction ID. So the refund shouldn't be a problem. I'm sure RBI has thought through that. But having said that, I'm just taking a counter view here, though I'm the payment data security guy here. But there are two parts to, when you actually make a transaction. Once you enter your card number, expiration date, you also supposed to enter CVV2 on an online transaction. Plus, you also get an OTP. I think the regulator has done a fantastic job. We were one of the first few countries to have implemented two-factor authentication way back, and it has helped a lot. The question now is, since we are trying to promote digital payments, one of the key things that we also need to consider is the experience part. I'm sure that RBI and everyone is going to think through that, but that's definitely a problem that we need to address. While I agree with all the other panelists, because we have to reduce the surface of fraud. But I'm a forensic investigator myself. We have been doing a lot of forensic investigations. Many of the payment frauds, not just in India but across the world, I've been part of it, and I couldn't vouch for more than what Deepali and others have mentioned, that we need to reduce the attack surface. But having said that, we have to enable businesses, and we need to make sure that people like people in your team continue to use digital payments. And if they don't use digital payments, then I'm sure that doesn't mean anything for digital payment security. So we need to be conscious of that. I'm just saying that as while we're putting all these safeguards, we need to be conscious that we need to promote digital payments, because that's the bigger purpose. And the second thing is, from a cybersecurity, I think one thing to add to whatever you said, just by avoiding storage, it's not going to safeguard. Obviously, you're going to transmit it through that. And that's where this master direction would be very useful, to make sure that we follow set. And this time, I think RBI has done a good job in terms of making sure they've also been very prescriptive. I've seen multiple other RBI guidelines in the past, which is quite directional, but here they've gone really in depth in terms of giving very prescriptive requirements. And I think it's all about enforcement now. A few fines here and there, I think would get things going fine.
I just want to say that the whole idea is to have a very robust grievance structure, and to also, secondly, implement common minimum standards of security controls for digital payments, products and services. And I'm very sure, you see, initially, now you're praising the two-factor authentication. When we introduced this in the year 2014-15, there was a furor.
Yes.
Then what is this? And it was so easy earlier, and we'll have to change our cards, and you don't consider the cost, and RBI has no idea, and this is all it's going to be very difficult. It's going to be très difficile, and they should really, they don't know. And now everybody says, yes, that is very good. That was excellent, because, two-factor authentication ensures that the card is not being used fraudulently. So going forward, I'm sure we are all status quoists. So we are all resistant to change.
Correct.
And particularly change which we don't completely understand. And we feel that, the earlier system was working fine. So if it ain't broke, then why are they fixing it? And why does the regulator need to pitch in? But ultimately, once the grievance system is 24/7, and once it is robust and strong, then I would also be able to comfortably transact online.
Okay.
Without having everyone laugh at me for clicking on the cash and delivery option every time I order a book. So I think this is going to work well. And secondly, then we have just done a book called The New Economic Paradigm, India in the COVID World. And I've written what has changed. What has changed is that the amount of digital transactions are now double. And now anyone and everyone has an access to a mobile phone with the JAM trilogy, trilogy of Jandan, Aadhaar and mobile. That allows you complete access, and that allows the world at your fingertips. You can get just what you want, and the transactions have doubled. I mean, this is a documented fact that the transactions are increasing exponentially, and therefore security and safety and settlement have also to
Which is why I'm wondering, and which is why I'm asking this question: that is it just, Pankaj? Is it just about user experience? Is that really what is making a lot of the retailers a little uncomfortable today?
So I would say that, right? My view is very clear that yes, consumer experience that we say, one-click checkout, something is something which is very, very important when we look at an online transaction framework, right?
Yeah.
So if you look at from a user perspective, let's not look at from anything else. Let's be straight here. If I'm a user, right, and I go to an OTT site, let's take an example, Netflix or something. I have SIs being done for maybe 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. If you ask me, if I hold 3 different cards in my wallet, right, every time I have to remember the card, I have to be in the pocket. What happens? I'm traveling, I don't have a card in my hand. I just know that it's just a subscription that I have to do. An OTT transaction can take place, and that's it. It's just a one-click transaction. Just say yes, and we are done. Now, what will happen is that every time when I move from 30-day to 60-day subscription to 90-day subscription, every time I have to have all the card and then check out. So the experience obviously is going to take a toll on this. There is no doubt about it. Today, India is a young generation economy, and I've been very honest and very pleasant to say that most of the next billion we are talking today, right? These people have started transacting online, right? From a 25, 30-year guy to a 45 to 80-year people. Even my father today started doing a lot of online transactions. So it's a huge framework change which we see. Single checkout is something that, it builds a lot of experience perspective. It brings a lot of value to the system ecosystem.
Okay, so let me ask you a follow-up question, and if anybody else also later wants to come into it. We, in the research that we were doing on this and seeing if there were other ways of going about it, one concept that came about was tokenization. Now, giving a specific token that masks your card details but still makes it a smoother experience. Now, is that something that we are using or can be used in a bigger way, could be a better alternative?
Absolutely. And Pankaj, between wow and ow, just remove one word. Between bonus and onus, just remove the B. If God forbid, if the card is misused or the details are you see, it's also a question of identity theft. Once you store everything about Pankaj and what he does and what he does not do, well, I could also impersonate as Pankaj. So the data confidentiality and the data integrity are also things. Phishing is also something which does happen. I mean, these are the perils on the digital autobahn. We want to just avoid the potholes, have firm structures in place, and be completely gung-ho about it so that everybody is safe and secure. And in time, the retailers and the payment aggregators will also realize, because custom is not going to come down.
Yes.
I mean, that which has to be done will be done.
Those who want to shop will shop. I mean, we're not going to step out to the store and shop any which way. So whichever way it will be. Yes. Pankaj, you want to add to the tokenization part?
Tokenization, sorry.
Yeah.
Tanvi, tokenization is going to take place in a major way, and the guidelines also mention tokenization.
Yeah.
And it's very important. It's an important integral part of the guidelines.
I think if you look at, even adding to what Dipali ma'am just said, right, a lot of tokenization activities started building with a lot of banks in place. A lot of, even Master Visa today have tokenization products, and they've started doing it. Mass tokenization happening across the board, right? Even from an Apple Pay, Google Pay, or you will see these tokenizations happening from the mass market perspective. But the view here is that, the internal tokenization, what merchants were doing, right? Now I don't have a card data stored on my website, right? I'm assuming somebody like Amazon's or Flipkart's or the it'll be interesting to see how that problem gets tackled after this card data is not being stored on the merchant's website. So that's something that it'll be interesting to know. Will be good to have views from the public out here as well.
Yeah, Darshan, you want to add?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm quite enthusiastic about the conversation that is happening around, because I was part of many of the tokenization guidelines on the security standards that was formed internationally. So first is tokenization. Someone needs to is basically a mapping. Someone has that mapping between our original card number and a pseudo card number, right? At the end of the day. So now the question is, who is going to have that tokenization? So until we are clear about it, we would not be able to address the pain point. So if you are saying, so tokenization is still going to be done by the same provider, the merchant, or so who is going to do that? So now many of the compromises that we have spoken about were aggregators who were doing tokenization and they still got compromised. So one thing that we need to be careful when we talk about any of these security controls is everything is has to be seen in perspective, right? So one of the few mistakes that we do is we are so over enthusiastic about any security control. So we've talked about multi-factor authentication, and it's a great thing. But multi-factor authentication cannot be done for certain cases wherein you are doing an application to database kind of authentication, because non-system users, right? Non-user systems, where so there are multiple. So everything has to be seen in perspective. That's number one. Number two is from a forensics angle. What we've been seeing is that the basic hygiene of security controls. I just want to compliment to whatever others are saying, that what I see from the RBI is getting the basics right, and that's what is very, very important. Cybersecurity is very simple if it is kept simple. But the moment we try to get it, try to overcomplicate it and try to bring in new jargons and try to do that, then it gets too messy. So the first thing what we need to do is practice what we preach. I think RBI has done a good job in putting together. We just need to make sure that it's implemented and implemented rigorously, and every institution which is mentioned there complies with those. And I think the problem which we have got it wrong, if I were to take that liberty, is the implementation and not the actual guidance, right?
Yeah, actually, I just wanted to speak about that.
Completely with you, Darshan. But the only thing is that customer protection, awareness, and grievance redress mechanisms go together. So you can't have one without the other. So once you say that you're getting this flood of complaints in the banking ombudsman offices, this is the downside, then recognizing that you have to do something to fix it. And as we go along, as you said, a fine here or a fine there is not going to be material, but the naming and shaming, as we've seen, all of us have seen in the recent past, has had an impact, and RBI will certainly devise ways. And this is done, as you yourself, Darshan, have been part of these protocols internationally. These are standard operating protocols of tokenization, masking, etc. And we will also embrace these. And we will embrace these to a higher and a better, larger end of digitization and financial inclusion, which will move apace with it.
So if I can take that point across to Mr. Duggal as well, because Mr. Duggal, in your opening remarks as well, you mentioned that there is also a need for a stronger legal framework, and perhaps in many instances where these apps claim that they don't even come under the regulatory framework of the RBI. So as we do, like Dipali said, as we do the consumer grievance redressal and awareness part, there also has to be the other side.
Absolutely. Ultimately, we cannot actually work in a silo. The current guidelines are great, but ultimately these stakeholders are not going to come under the remit of the RBI. These stakeholders still will become intermediaries under the Information Technology Act 2000. And if there's no adequate penal consequences for not complying with basic standards of cybersecurity, we're going to still go in a wild, wild jungle ecosystem. I think the time has come where stakeholders have to realize that cybersecurity now is a way of life. Well, the government is about to come up with a new national cybersecurity strategy in the next few weeks or months, and that should help inform our thought processes. But again, India does not require a strategy alone itself. India requires legal frameworks. Unfortunately, people understand the penal consequences of the law. And if we can learn from experiences of other countries, whether it's Singapore, whether it's Thailand, whether it's Vietnam or even China, and then customize our own legal approaches on cybersecurity, that can be a great step going forward. Ultimately, Indians are going to be fantastic, fertile targets for cybersecurity breaches. Let's quickly start understanding that. And therefore, let's all start contributing in our own remarkable manner in trying to protect cybersecurity. But just the lip service to an ISO 27001 is no longer the need of the hour. The need of the hour is a more holistic approach. The government has to lead from the forefront, but the private sector has to contribute in equal measure through proactive approaches to show that, look, by in having cybersecurity as the central portion of my business model, I can not just go ahead and protect people's interests, but I can also go ahead and expand my business. So it's a fascinating space, and hopefully we should see a lot of action in this direction.
And then we'll also have a lot more conversations. I'm sorry, I'm completely out of time, but it's been a pleasure to have all of you.
I just want to mention
Yes.
the new umbrella entity which the RBI has introduced, which is going to be like a self-regulatory organization and will hopefully address many of the issues of the legal framework, of the enforcement of penalty and of contract, privity of contract, which have been raised.
Which have been raised, and for a while now that that setup